Welcome, everyone, to this talk on product and VC. My name is Mary Beth Snodgrass, and I'll be talking about how VC is an invisible influencer on product leadership. Some of you may be wondering why I'm talking about this topic. I've never heard it brought up in product communities or among thought leaders in this space, but that lack of discussion is one of the reasons why I believe it's so important. I've been a product leader, a founder, and a consultant to founders on startups and products for over a decade now. And for most of that time, I've been a product leader in founder mode. Nowadays, most of us understand what founder mode is. In founder mode as a product leader, I truly believe that product is the heart and soul of startups. I also believe that product is the engine of startups that gets you, your team, your company where you're wanting to go. What's not often understood is that VCs can have considerable influence over the purpose of your product, even if they're not investing. And that VCs are providing this critical fuel for startups to get to where they're going. Even if you're not seeing VCs inject that fuel directly into the tank. Ideally, customer revenue would cover all the costs of building product and startups. But since that's not the case, outside funding, typically from VCs, is necessary. If all of that isn't enough to convince you of the importance of this topic, at the end of this talk, I will share a bit about a space I know well, digital health, and in particular, high-profile bankruptcy in that space, because it highlights the misaligned incentives and expectations between VC and startups, customers, and end users in the digital health ecosystem. A bit more about myself. I am the founder and leader of an all-women's product advisory collective that has the dual mission of accelerating product while also elevating women leaders. What I've learned since starting Path is that it's not uncommon for product leaders to have relationships with founders that are fraught with tension. In my experience, having worn both hats, founder and product leader, one of the biggest sources of my internal and external tension was the pace of change and progress. Key drivers of this fast pace were two interrelated things: runway and investment. Right? And product leaders, if they're not founders, they're not necessarily exposed to the investor conversations and dynamics and why some of the decisions get made the way they get made that may shift strategy or lead to product pivots or reprioritization of a roadmap. But with more knowledge about how VCs influence product, I believe product leaders could have a better understanding of founders and maybe even eliminate those tensions that exist. So at Path over the past year, I've also committed to better understanding VC and building relationships with more like-minded VCs in the ecosystem. And something that we've done more recently is created a collective venture partner role. And I'm now representing PAC as a venture partner at Capacity Capital, which invests in underestimated founders who are leading high growth revenue generating startups. All of that is context for saying PMs generally are not aware of how investors are fueling, steering, and impacting products. Having an understanding of this influence can help PMs gain a new understanding or perspective, product discovery, expand their own influence, strengthen products, and ideally improve results for your team and your company. A few key takeaways that I hope you leave with today are listed here. One is how VCs work, in particular, the aspects of VCs that affect products. And then also what the areas of alignment or tension are between VCs and product. Similar to how there can be healthy or unhealthy tension between product and engineering or product and sales, there can be healthy and unhealthy tension between VC and products. Of course, the goal is healthy tensions. Through this talk, you should be able to better identify where there's alignment or tension and make adjustments. Just to make sure we're starting off on the same page, the typical standard perspective today is that founders do the fundraising and investor relations, product leaders, CPOs, they focus on product. My belief is that future CPOs will be the ones who understand how investors think, behave, and are incentivized because they'll be better equipped to mitigate risk and accelerate products. A few key facts about VCs that I did not know when I was pitching VCs as an entrepreneur are listed here. If you're in Silicon Valley or a major tech hub and you've been in tech for years, some of this may be obvious to you, but I never once stopped to wonder where VCs got their money from. I didn't realize that VCs were also fundraising from other investors, family offices, institutional funds. And a key term is assets under management. And this is basically how much is in a fund. While the majority of AUM is allocated to investing in startups, a portion of that goes to managing the funds. What's most common is that 2% of AUM each year goes to covering costs to manage the fund. And this can include salaries of the people who are doing that. So if I raise a $10 million fund, that means I have $200,000 a year to cover my expenses. VCs raise money from limited partners. These are the investors putting money into the fund. And there's a strong precedence for the terms that LPs will agree to. One of these precedents is the lifetime of the fund, which is typically 10 years. That's how long the fund will be managed by the VC. Within 10 years, LPs expect to receive a return on their investments. All that is to say that VCs, similar to startups, also have a runway and customers, but they're just structured differently. Before we get into discussing the areas of alignment, tension between VC and products, I think it's helpful to talk about how building product is similar to building homes. Let's say that I am a plumber and I start off working for a plumbing and AC company. I'm already really good at doing pipes, maintaining them, installing them. And I move into dockworks, doing AC, and I'm just really good at my craft. And I learn new things, foundation, electrical, roofing. And eventually I have my own general contracting company. I get hired to build a home or two. Then I have a vision for a community of homes that I want to build. And I need to raise funds from an investor. Now, investors in real estate have all sorts of different priorities and interests. Some investors may finally prioritize location, location, location. But even within that, there's a lot of different ways to evaluate location. So it could be, what is the location worth today or in 10 or 20 years? And what is the natural built environment like? Or what is the access to affordable luxury? So there's a lot of considerations. And as a builder, I'm looking for investors who not only back my vision and my values, especially around good craftsmanship, my goals, but I'm looking for investors who will also finance it properly, supply enough funding so that I can build a really innovative, modern exterior and interior and design so that people have a great quality of life living in these homes. When it comes to managing risk, there are certain risks that builders and investors are aligned on avoiding, like avoiding building a home on a cliff, or in this case, maybe a parking garage. It's just not insurable or sellable. But there are some risks that are either not necessarily obvious or transparent, or not necessarily clear alignment. I may be really committed and excellent at building great modern exteriors, but I just don't have the skills or the follow through, or maybe the funding to craft a great interior. And that may be fine for some investors, but it's not for others. An analogy for building AI solutions, when you're building a home, how you build also carries risk. There can be risks for your contractors and employees, what kind of safety measures you have. There can be risks for the people who buy and ultimately live in the home, depending on what quality materially. These risks can be near term or they can be long term. And investors and builders have to decide which risks are worth taking, but there's not always full transparency on what these risks are for investors. Over the next several slides, I'm going to compare and contrast different issues where investors and product leaders are aligned or where there's tension. But the examples that I give won't be exhausted. There could be nuance, there could be exceptions. There's a lot of nuance in product, as we all know. And when I'm talking about VCs, I'm generally talking about traditional VC, which happens to be the majority of VCs. But there are new fund managers that are bringing more innovative ways to financing startups, like Capacity Capital, where I'm a venture partner, but they're in the minority. So just recognize that what I'm saying isn't necessarily applicable across the board, across all VCs, startups, or product leaders. Product discovery is a term I am assuming everyone listening in knows about and understands is critical to product vision, product strategy, product roadmap, and that there's general agreement that continuous product discovery is important for keeping a pulse on markets and competitors and customers. Investors generally share the same interest in understanding or keeping a pulse on markets, on companies operating in these spaces, and what the future M&A opportunities might be for startups in their portfolio. But the big difference comes in terms of how each party goes about collecting this intel. VCs may go to a networking event or call up a buddy and say, how's your investment in ABC startup going? Or what are you planning on investing in this year? PMs, when they're conducting competitor research, they're looking into unique differentiation, value prop, ICPs, go-to-market channels, and they're really coming at it from a different perspective. When VCs make decisions to invest or reinvest, this different approach to research and intel can lead to different conclusions on the market and opportunities. So even though there's alignment here, there is also a tension to manage, and there's opportunities for sharing insights and sharing information strategically. When it comes to innovation, generally speaking, product leaders and founders are executing innovation. Yes, they're setting strategy, but the most important part of strategy is executing it. So they're living innovation day to day, especially if they're pre-product market fit. Investors are investing in innovation, and that's actually quite different from innovating. The reason I even mention this is that for a few years, when I was engaging VCs, I assumed that there was an understanding of the challenges inherent in innovation, but I learned that that's not necessarily the case. And so what investors are doing is they're using standard deal terms, and they may be following the lead of other investors who had successful results. Whereas product leaders and founders, particularly early stage, they are aiming to disrupt, to outcompete, to differentiate. And the underlying theme here is that innovation and growth requires discomfort. It's just part of the process, but investors are not here for the discomfort. This became clear to me about a year ago when I sat in on a call for LPs and GPs, and LPs were giving some advice to GPs about their own fundraise. And an LP shared that if he's reviewing a deal or receiving a pitch and something makes him uncomfortable, he doesn't ask a question to better understand. He just walks away from the deal. He leans out from the discomfort. That was really eye-opening and clarifying for me because my instinct as a product person, when a customer shares something that they're uncomfortable with or concerned about, I want to know more. I lean in. I'm curious. I ask them to clarify, or I offer to clarify. This mental model, leaning into the discomfort versus leaning out, is very different from scouting innovation or scouting investments. Understanding this is important to navigating the dynamics and also understanding how to communicate with investors. When it comes to outcomes and key results, generally speaking, product leaders are on the execution side of the equation. Of course, OKRs require strategy, but most of the time and effort will be spent driving toward OKRs. What really showed me the tensions clearly between building product and investing in it is that when I was a founder, engaging VCs in digital health, I received a series of suggested OKRs or really goalposts that investors shared that, were to make me investable in their eyes. And these goalposts kept shifting over time after we would achieve one. And so I'll give you an example of how these conversations went over the course of a few years. First, in preliminary conversations, VCs would say, okay, we want to see that you can build it and that you have users using it. Okay, we do that. And I come back and I say, okay, that's good, but we want to see X number of users. Okay, we do that. And we also achieve some important health outcomes for end users. Oh, okay, that's great, they say, but they want to see more validation of those improved health outcomes. Okay, we do that. We come back and they say, okay, that's great, but I see now that you're going to move from B2C to B2B to C. We want to see proof that these enterprise customers you're talking about signing up really will commit. Okay, we do that. We come back and they say, actually, right now, we need to see upfront payment from these companies that haven't yet received your services, or we need to see proof of a really compelling annual recurring revenue. So all these shifting goalposts also led to changes for our products, or they led to me not being able to follow through on my promises to the team. So what that means is if I had to come back with, okay, we now need to onboard enterprise, we need a new onboarding process and we need new compliance measures designed in. And if I'd promise a team that once we achieve these particular milestones, we'll be able to raise funds and bring on new team members. I can't do that. So that means that everyone's still continuing to wear multiple hats instead of just the one hat that they're really great at. And so this can lead to burnout and exhaustion, which is a sensation that I think was pretty common in tech at different points over the past several years. VCs aren't the only reason that burnout happens, and that's compounded by all these fast changes in the market and customer expectations and new technologies, right? And this tension around OKR is one that has to be actively managed. As far as timeline that investors have to return to demonstrate a return for LPs, this is actually one of the most strategic aspects for product leaders, product managers to understand. If we use the home building analogy, generally when you build a home, the intent is to build to last. And similarly in product, you want to build a sustainable, secure, modifiable, reliable architecture. Just like you want a solid foundation, good plumbing, functioning electricity in a home. But you can rush putting the bones together or skim on investing in the arteries. But that's not what a true craftsman wants to do, right? And the difference between building a home and building a product is that as a product manager, instead of just selling the home, you essentially continue to live with your customers to continue earning, maintaining their trust, and maintaining product market fit. The reason this matters is if your startup receives funding from an investor and they're in year 7 of the fund, they may have a conversation with the founder that says something like, we want to see an exit or an IPO or an acquisition within the next 18 to 24 months. And in order for your team to really come together and rally to achieve this super ambitious outcome, you need alignment. And so you're saying, guys, we are in this together. We're building a great company. We really care about our mission and our customers and gaining their trust. And really improving our customer lifetime value. And this message may or may not align with the OKRs that you need to achieve in this ambitious time period. I'll give an example of an allegedly criminal M&A deal to drive this point home. There's a student loan fintech, Frank, that was acquired by JP Morgan in 2021. And they had used synthetic data to basically build out their customer Rolodex to make it more appealing to acquirers. And JP Morgan, pretty quickly after the acquisition, regretted the decision. The founder is now facing criminal and civil charges. Clearly, using synthetic data was all about trying to look good for an acquisition. It wasn't about building real customer value or retention or LTV. So the timelines that VCs have to generate returns for LPs can either explicitly or implicitly pressure founders to drive towards certain outcomes that may not be in the best interest of customers or in the best interest of building a great product. You can also do all the right things, be highly customer centric, build a great product, do everything legally, and still go bankrupt. And that's some of the examples that we saw in digital health. Misaligned incentives in digital health were one of the reasons, certainly not the only reason, for bankruptcies in the space. I won't be able to talk about everything here, but I want to talk about the example of Pear Therapeutics because their bankruptcy was really impactful and insightful for stakeholders in the ecosystem, including myself. Pear was a pioneer in digital therapeutics, which basically means that physicians could prescribe a digital app or intervention instead of prescribing pills. They were FDA approved, they had strong clinical validation, they were fueled by strong funding, and went public at a $1.6 billion valuation. But even while going public, they were struggling to get payments or reimbursements from insurers. That means they weren't really getting payments on time in an efficient, effective manner. And within a couple of years, they went bankrupt. So the fact that this NASDAQ listed company, it was highly valued, wasn't able to get reimbursements, which was a similar struggle that we were going through at our digital health startup, proved just how challenging it is for digital health startups to truly scale, even when they're delivering great outcomes for patients and they're delivering value for health systems. My message is that if you are currently at a VC or PE-backed company, or you expect to be at some point in your career, it is important to learn how investors think, behave, and are rewarded because it will give you a new perspective on product discovery. It will help you get out in front of issues earlier on, expand your own influence, both internally and externally, strengthen your product, and improve results for your team and your company. I believe for all the product craftsmen out there who care about building great products, that if you keep a pulse on investors, you can also keep the soul of your product alive and well. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I look forward to your questions or comments. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn or reach out by email.